Hey everybody, Anna Sabramwitz here, and I wanted to shoot this video to show you a little bit behind the scenes of how I run my cohort and some of the things that we talk about during our sessions, our weekly sessions. So today what I wanted to share with you is the idea of that story outline and the interactive outline that you get to design as a part of the design process for the interactive learning episode. So the story outline, if you want to think about it in like everyday terms, it's if you come home and somebody says, hey, how was your day? You're going to give them the major events that happened chronologically, hopefully, that happened to you that day that made it exciting, right? So you're not going to tell them the time at 10 a.m. when you had to go to the bathroom or, you know, at 10:15 when you actually opened the email or whatever. Unless those are really important and pivotal events to your story, you're going to omit them. Just like, you know, when you see Tom Cruise going from from New York to Melbourne, they don't show you the plane, unless there's some action happening on the plane. You never see the travel. It's just instantly, that's where you are at. So the story outline is really the beats of your story. Now, after that, after you have this story outlined and it is tight and you've pitched it and it's fabulous and it's working and it's compelling, then you move into the interactive outline. The interactive outline is there to show and obviously make very clear about when people are going to be making the decisions. And the decisions are about giving people agency, which is the fact that they choose things that mean something, so they're meaningful. And also it gives them this feeling of autonomy, that they are in charge and the things that they're doing mean something. This is very important to your story. So one of the things that really happens as this process unfolds is there's this idea of consistent logic. So what you'll find, let's say, on very common in software sites, they'll tell you things like, let's say you go to Articulate and you'll find something like, we have, I think the last time I checked, 4.5 million assets, right? And you're like, wow, that's a lot of stuff, a lot of beautiful stuff, professionally designed. But why do we need all those things, right? And the reason is because a lot of that is used to dress up content that has no context, relevance. And so one of the things we kind of fall into as designers, especially with e-learning, is that we feel we have to dress up that content very beautifully from slide to slide. And so what happens is, let's say you start a slide and you try and be creative with that one, and then the next slide comes and you try and dress up that content again. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. However, that is completely draining, and there's no way you can be as innovative as possible. You really are just creating a whole bunch of interactions because the content does not stand up to anything, right? But then I want you to think about the fact that, let's say this morning, what did you have to do? What was your morning like? You had to make some decisions, right? Your decisions were have tea or coffee, brush your teeth or floss your teeth first, stay in bed, go to work, whatever it was, right? Very, very, very important things, but very simple things in essence, right? Decisions, this or that, very compelling as well. And so one of the things you find when you get into designing your own interactive learning episodes is that the idea of dressing up that content, the idea of designing and over-designing the user interface we're actually on the opposite end of the spectrum. In fact, you want to make that as minimal as possible, because novelty takes in the user interface, and surprise in that way actually takes away from the story. And it probably, in many ways, takes away from the agency of the user, because they're focusing on the story and the decision making. And if every single time they join go to a new part of the story, they have to figure out where everything is all over again, because it's the opposite of what we're trying to do. So one of the things you do at the very beginning when you're designing this interactive outline is you're designing the consistent logic by which somebody will make decisions. So a lot of times you'll see things like, it's this or that, and the user interface is very minimal because we want to have somebody not be distracted by that. We want the story making to be seamless, comfortable, and that for them to actually, because the content of the story and the context of it is so meaningful, that's the only thing we want them to focus on, not anything else. Everything else is there to augment that experience, not enhance it as far as add, bling. So let's just talk quickly about what that interactive outline, how do you start with that, right? So one of the things you want to think about is if you have a learner and they are novice, the first thing you're building out, your story really, and the story beats, are those major basically points that drive and engage the learner to become an expert at something. An expert can be defined in many ways. For me, sometimes the expert is somebody who didn't know that they had a problem before, and now they know they have a problem, and now they're going to seek out some help to get it resolved. To me, that is success. But they've been able to achieve it through this story. So this is your story outline. And this is where it's a great outcome, right? This is success. Yay, everybody's happy. So I build that first. In my world, we call this the green path. This is the path where you're deciding what the outcome is going to be. You can even work backwards. What's that story going to be that's going to get them there, right? But that doesn't end there. Not all stories end the right way, and not all outcomes should lead to a happy ending, right? Sometimes you don't make the right decision. So what happens? I think about those things. I explore what they are, do my case study research that I did in my story, for my story, and I figure out, well, what if somebody messes up? Where does that take them? So I could have multiple places. I could say, this is an okay ending, a fair ending, and a poor ending. A poor ending, that's P. Hee hee. So I have all these other endings, right? So what that means is that there are points in this story, there are decisions that will actually take me out of there and drive me to these different endings. And then I also have to decide with my interactive outline is, are some of these decisions that are going to take me to an ending that's okay or fair, are there points in here that are going to bring me back, help me realize that I've made a mistake, and actually, we call this the redemption path, allow me to redeem myself and maybe come back to actually be able to achieve this perfect ending, this great one, right? So those are the things we're always thinking about. And the thing is, this in itself, this is not, the first time you run this story, you're going to have to run through it to make sure that it flows, it's compelling, it's got the right sequence of events, because the structure here is very premeditated and it follows borrows very heavily from Hollywood formulas on what it means to create a compelling story. So we borrow from there, but also now we're adding this interactive element, which is the idea of agency, which Hollywood movies don't have yet, and except Bandersnatch. And then what happens is now we're taking these two things, combining them and thinking about them in as well. Do they work as a story? Do they work as a sequence? Do they give the person the feeling that they're making meaningful choices? Those are all the things that we have to think about as we're iterating through this and refining it, because by goodness, it doesn't happen the first time. You have to get comfortable with the process of revisiting these things and working through them as an end user and testing it with people who potentially will be your end user one day. So I hope you found that helpful. Now, if you want to dig in more deeply into these topics and you feel like this is something that you'd like to implement, of course, I will add a link so you can book a strategy session with me so we can talk about what your goals are. And if we're a great fit, then I'll see if you can make it into the next cohort, which will be happening in May 21st. Now, either way, I hope you found this video very helpful and it gives you some insight into how I think, how we do our work. And if you have any questions or anything else, please let me know. Otherwise, I hope you have a fabulous rest of the weekend. All right, take care. Bye, friends.